Morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good. Hanging out here at the Powermetrix bunker once again. So my name is Chris Mullins. I'm the product manager here at Powermetrix. Today I wanted to go over using the data that you download into MeterSite Manager, which is our PC software that we use with our equipment. So I want to be able to show you, how you can export this data into Excel and just maybe give you a few easy tips on how to use Excel. And I've kind of seen some technicians are really good at Excel. Some have very little experience. So I can give you a couple of tips on how to look at this data in a more intuitive fashion. Coming up, this is our Series 7, so we've been doing this for 14 weeks now. This will be the 14th week. Today we're going to talk about exporting and analyzing data using Excel. Thursday we will not have a webinar, so we will have this will be a break for this Thursday, but we do return next Tuesday, a week from today, and we're going to go into high and low voltage PT testing. I've been noticing this is a growing trend for utilities of needing to test their PTs, especially their high voltage PTs. Some of the state PUCs are requiring it now. They want to be able to test the PTs and validate that while they're out there at a metering point. So we're going to go over that. And we have probes and products designed just for high voltage and low voltage. So if you want to test your low voltage PT, 600 volts or less, we can do that as well. And then on Thursday, we're going to do a little bit more of a troubleshooting class. This is real error versus user error. So a real error would be, so if I come out to the site, use my PowerMaster, and I get a possible cross-phase connection. Is that real? Is there actually a wiring error, or did I just put the probe on backwards? So John Jones is going to help you guys kind of diagnose problems in the field to make sure that you're right before you go to your supervisor or your management team to say, hey, I think there's a problem. Because we want to make sure that we got all our ducks in a row before we start, ringing the bell. Something could be wrong at this site. So today's agenda is we're going to go over the export features in MeterSite Manager 2. Some customers know these, some don't. So I'm going to lean more to the people that don't know these features exist, and we'll talk about those. Some of the analysis features using Excel. Like I mentioned before, some people are very comfortable with Excel, some are not. So I'm hoping some of these things I'll review will give you a little more comfortable using Microsoft Excel going forward. Using a template for custom reporting. So with this newest release in MeterSite Manager 2, which is version 2607, we have a custom template that you could use and export individual data into this custom template. There are several utilities out there that have an existing system that they say, yeah, I love your data, but can I put it into a flat file where I've got this, and this? The answer is yes, we can do that with this custom template. And then that kind of bleeds into editing the template to do what you want it to do, which is to accommodate any kind of string data your database manager, your IT professional is looking for. So some of the export features we have in MeterSite Manager 2, the latest one, you can export individual meter or CT data into a CSV or text file. Commonly, you may hear this called as a flat file. That's what they mean, is a CSV or text. So you can do it individually, or you can also do it as a bulk. So I'll show you how to do both. So I can actually export the entire database into a flat file as well. For using the Excel template, you can export the individual test into that template and then do what you want to with that. I will talk about this, but I won't review it. I'll review it for another time. But with this new version of MeterSite Manager, you can actually synchronize data with an integrated SQL Server database. That's a brand new feature we have that gives your database management a lot of tools they can use to actually pull data out of our database and actually do a direct connection. There's no import-export anymore. It's actually a direct connection using our database. And then it maintains synchronization. So anytime you open, edit, add, delete, it actually synchronizes every time you close Meter Site Manager. Very, very useful tool for database managers you may have on your team. Okay, so let's get into the Meter Site Manager side. So I've got Meter Site Manager open, and if you ever want to check and see what version you're running, you can always go to this Help About button. And so I'm running 2607, which is the latest version. And when you go to our website, there is a template you can download there, and that's what I was referring to. And when you find that template, you can store it into a directory of your choosing, but make sure you go into Tools and Preferences, and then there's this Customizations button right here. Make sure you point your database, your file, to that, and then hit OK, so it knows where you're actually putting that export file. So that template is free. You can go to Technical Library, download it along with version 2607, all for free. There's as long as you have a PowerMaster, you can use that. But do make sure you hook that up before you start trying to export to Excel. Okay, so let's get into some of the export features. You'll notice that all of these buttons here are marks, so I can actually mark individual tests, or I can go over here and click on Mark All, which means it will check mark all boxes. Depending on how much data you have in there, it may take a few seconds. If you don't have a lot, it's almost instantaneous. But this one is I would say it's a semi-large database, not huge. So I've got everything. I clicked Mark All. I checked everything. So now I'm going to go over to Tools, and I'm going to go to Export Site Data. And that's going to open up another window. So this is giving me all the sites that I've got that I'm going to export to. And I'll kind of talk about these things here. Limit old test data. I don't want to limit anything, but for example, if I did just want to, I just want to do the last 12 months, I can limit that. But I'm going to export everything that's in each site. I'm going to select if I want to do a text or a CSV file. And then I'm going to save, which data set do you want to save? I'm going to do the meter, but you can also do the CT data. And if you have a 3 series, you can actually output the CT burden measure as well. And then there's different formats, and it's really just how much data you want. I typically use the standard, which is a little bit compressed, but if you want all, which has everything, you can use that as well. All would be helpful if you're looking for any kind of, if you're using any custom fields in the PowerMaster or Meter Site Manager, you probably want to select that. But if you're not using custom fields, just go ahead and click on the standard. So let's go ahead and export this. Click on that. Now it's going to ask me how do I want to save this. And I've already got one, so I'm just going to overwrite this one. But here's where you can actually, this is where it's saving to. So I'm saving it in my documents. You can save it wherever you want to with network or your remote directory somewhere. So I'm going to click Save. Yeah, I'm going to overwrite. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at it. Can't get to the... It's funny when you use GoToMeeting, it kind of blocks all your all of your windows. Okay, so here's my data I've got here. So it's going to export everything that I've got out of the database. Your site ID, your customer, your service type, your meter form, billing multiplier, critical. If you have that, I recommend always recording that. But you can see that I've got a lot of stuff in there. So I've got most of the stuff that's just related to the meter data. So it's got voltage and current, it's got the power here, power factor, but here's my big one that I've got, percent registration. So so this is exported to a CSV file, right? But in Microsoft, by default, if you have Excel loaded on your computer, it's going to use that to open up a CSV file, and that's exactly what I did. So an Excel extension would be like a .xls or a .xlsx. That's some of the 2013 or greater. But it also supports opening CSV as well, which is what I've got here. So when we close this out, we can actually convert this to a spreadsheet instead of a CSV, and the spreadsheet allows you to have a lot more features. So with the first thing I want to do, if you guys are familiar with Excel, I've got headers up here, and I want to go ahead and let's go ahead and freeze our pane. So freezing the pane means that I'm gonna freeze that top row. So now I can see my headers, and then when I scroll down, it stays there, right? So I can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and my headers are still down there, and I can still see what's going on. So that's tip number 1 from Chris. Freeze your top frame. Okay, so if everybody can hear me now, I apologize about that, but just somehow my audio cut out. All right, so we were talking about so we locked our top row so we can see what's going on. But now I want to start doing a little bit of analysis. And so Excel has this feature called conditional formatting. And that's over here into Home. So if I click on the Home button, and I'm using Excel 2013, there's a little button here called conditional formatting. So what this conditional formatting does, it gives me kind of a range where I can kind of select the data I want to pinpoint. So, so I'm looking at meter registration data. So let's do greater than. So let's pretend I've got all 0.2% meters out there. So I'm going to do 100.2. Anything greater than 100.2, show me red. Okay. But I can also stack these conditional formats on top of each other. So I can add a less than as well. So I've got a greater than, now I can do a less than. So 99.8. So this means that I'm actually looking at any meter test plus or minus 0.2%, right? So I hit OK. So now all these ones in red are flagging outside of my tolerance, right? So it gives me a little bit of ammo to figure out what's going on. Something's obviously going on here, probably just a hookup, bad hookup, I'm guessing. But you know, I kind of look at what else is going on that may give us a good idea. So I like to look at meter registration first. And those who don't know, the next column over here called label. So the PowerMaster can support both a customer load test and it can support a phantom load test. So if it has no label here, that means it's a customer load test. So you were testing the meter under customer load conditions. If it's got a label here, a full load power factor, and light load, that lets you know that it was actually a phantom load test. Duh. But it's giving you a good designator of what's going on. So there's also, I like to look at power factor as well. So we can actually do one here. So let's go to power factor and let's do another conditional format. And let's say highlight rules less than a 0.85 power factor. So a lot of these right here, you know, are showing up probably because of the power factor test, right? But this one was a customer load test. That's a little bit below 0.85, slightly below here. Not too, I mean, a little bit off here, but nothing too bad, right? Except for the ones that actually have a full load test. So that's another conditional format you got. So we looked at power factor, we looked at percent registration. Also, I like to look at my current. So where do meters, for a class 20 meter, typically the lowest test point that you test on, the light load test point, is a 1/4 amp. And the meter manufacturer doesn't guarantee anything really below a 1/4 amp, right? At least it doesn't guarantee that 0.2%. So this is another column here for I've got my current A. IRMS stands for the RMS value for current A. So current RMS value for A, and then B and C. That's what the label is. So we can actually do a conditional format on all three of these. And I go to Home, Conditional Formatting, Highlight Cell Rules, and Less Than. So I want anything to show up that's less than 0.25 amps. Hit OK. And there's quite a bit here. C phase, probably low. So if it's got this 0, it's more than likely a service type that's probably either a single phase service or like a network. That's what it looks like. It's a 3-wired network because you got current on A and B, but nothing on C. So don't worry about that one. But something like this, that's a light load, 0.8 average there. You can see here, right here, average of 0.4 amps. That's a pretty light loaded site. Same thing here, just barely below that as well. So again, it gives you another tool you can look at, because if I got a bad registration, let's see, let's look at this one, 90%. Does anything explain that? Imbalanced load possibly, 2 amps on A, 2 amps on B, hardly anything on C. Could that affect the meter registration? Possibly. It would be unusual, but it's possible. This one's slightly out, it was 100.3%, but notice that I've got no current on C phase either. If you guys ever have these are 4-wire deltas that have a high leg C phase, we ran across a lot of these services that have no load on C phase at all. And so sometimes that can affect registration because if it has 0 amplitude on one phase, it could affect it. So it kind of gives you a tool to kind of help out determine what's going on. Another one I like to look at is total harmonic distortion. And those are all the way over here. So this is voltage THD for A. So that's voltage total harmonic distortion for A, B, and C. And I always like to look at, is there anything above 10%? So again, what do? We go to Home, Conditional Formatting, Highlight Cell Rules, greater than 10, and hit OK. And I think I checked this before. This one was probably good. So there was nothing on the potential side that had a lot of harmonics. But on the current side, I think that was a different story. So we do the same thing for current, which is I, current THD for A, and then A, B, and C. And then again, conditional formatting. Greater than, I like to look at anything above 20% of total harmonic distortion. So that's going on here. So this one was relatively high. So this one was an average of around 48% harmonic distortion, which is pretty high. It could be an industrial site. But I remember this registration came out fine. Had a pretty low, so about 0.6 amps on the secondary, and the registration was okay, but power factor wasn't so great. 0.8 power factor. Probably some kind of industrial load that was very capacitive, and so probably an idling motor would be my guess. That's in the facility that's causing that kind of distortion. Not that uncommon. So that was kind of the tools you can use. So conditional formatting is a great tool to use for Excel to kind of help you isolate problems you may have. Well, that's a big one. Check that one out. So let's move on to the CT data. Let's close that one out. I don't want I'll save that. And let's do this. We still got the mark all, and now I'm going to go back to the tools. Still going to do the export site data. Now this time let's do the CT. And I'm going to export this. And I've done this one as well, so I'm going to just overwrite this one. Yes, that's okay. And then let's look it up. Okay, so I've got the CT data here. It's got my site ID. The nice thing about it, this one gives the phase, the actual probe that was tested, what phase it was on. If you did a burden test, it actually steps through, it gives you each burden step. So here's a 0 burden, 0.1 ohms, 0.3, 0.5. So remember, like we did first time, I want to make sure I want to go to view, and I want to freeze that top row. So when I scroll down, my top row stays static. And then now we can start using our conditional formatting to kind of look at what's outside. So the very last column here, AE, that's your percent error. So percent error of the nameplate. So I like to look at anything above 2%. So I click on that row, go to Home, Conditional Formatting, highlight cell rules greater than 2. And hit OK. Now all my red's showing up here. So that puts me into troubleshooting mode. You know, as Jones likes to say, look at all your tools. This gives me it's a symptom, right? So I've got pretty bad percent errors on this CT, but what could be causing that, right? So, and then I start looking at, okay, you know, I know the rules of a CT. So if a CT is below its nameplate, or below 10% of its nameplate, it doesn't have a stated accuracy anymore. So what can I do now? So I'm looking at this particular site. So really this is just the same site. A phase was okay, B phase was good, C phase was pretty bad. But now let's move over to my secondary amps. Oh, I see what's going on. There was no load on that CT. So having, with barely any load on that CT at all, this is my secondary current, by the way, this column here, secondary, and this was the primary current. So on this particular test, I measured 0.002 amps on the secondary side and only about a 1/4 amp on the primary on a 300/5 CT. So we know it's not going to perform very well. So that kind of explains why that's going on. So you may want to be able to, you can meter site manager, you can actually, you know, push this data back down to the Powermaster until have a technician go back out and retest it when it does have more load to verify that CT is performing. So good, another tool you got there. This one, a little bit the same. I think this one was, this is on a flex probe, C phase as well. Notice, here's an interesting one. Notice that this was the first burden step. This was at 0 ohms. I had 0.8%. Looks great, right? Now all of a sudden I've got 4% at the next burden step, 2% error, 6% error. So I'm seeing some oscillation there, right? And what the next thing I look at is, did my primary current change or my secondary current change? It did a little bit. So my primary current is still pretty low. It's a 305 CT, and I'm only measuring an amp on the primary. Oops, this one here. And 0.03 amps on the secondary. But there is, looks like there is a bit of a load shift here from 0.03 to 0.2, and that caused an error. I don't think that's a big enough error to cause that, so I would be very, very suspicious of this site, and it's possible this CT could be overburdened. Sometimes when I look at these numbers, when I see, you know, a wide range from the first burden step, which is 0 ohms, all the way to, we did a 0.5 ohm on this one, all the way to 6%. that typically looks like a load change, like something happened where the customer may have turned on an AC unit or a motor switched on, and so you could see that in the middle of the test. But I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of secondary current change, so my guess is that that could be real, whereas the CT is overburdened or the wiring is going bad, or Corona has Corona on it, ironically. So that's some tools you can use for CT stuff. So we'll move on from that. And this is a CSV file, and so if I wanted to save this into an Excel, I can go to go to File, and Save As, and then I'll just select a directory. And notice I've got that CSV by default, but now I can save it as a spreadsheet here. And that gives me a little bit more, what that does, by saving it as a spreadsheet, it saves that conditional formatting. If it saves that, when I changed that top row to free so it doesn't move up and down, it gives you that ability to do that. With a CSV, it's kind of a dumb file. It's a flat file. It doesn't save any kind of special things. So if you do use that conditional formatting, do make sure you save that as a spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet rather than keeping it as a CSV. That's the only tip there. Okay, so we looked at the export to meter, export to CT, and did some analysis with that. Now let's talk about the template that I mentioned before in the beginning, which is that custom template we've got where you can actually export your data. So let's do that as an example. I'm going to clear because I can only do the restriction you have with the custom Excel report is that you can only export one data set at a time, if that makes sense. So I'm going to select this site here. And so this is a data set. So if you notice that bold date, we call that internally, we call that a master test record. Guys may call it like a test session. So I can only export a test session at a time. So in this one, all I got to do is just click on this bold date, and then I go over here to Tools and Export Data to Excel. Notice it's a little bit different from Export Site Data. Now I'm going to export this data to Excel. And then it's going to ask me just Excel export. And you're going to notice what's going to happen here at the bottom. You're going to see Excel kind of populate. It's going to run, and then it's going to close again. And so it's telling me that, yep, I saved it right here. Okay, let's go find it. Here it is. This is kind of like a false error I've noticed before. Just make sure you say yes when you open it. I think it sees it as a on our system. A lot of our stuff is backed up using a network directory, and so it goes out and sees something and then it says, "Oh, there's an error," but it's not really an error. All right, so make sure you click on Enable Editing if you do have something like this, and then expand that. So this is the template that I have. It's just something I created so you can have as an example that you can download this. So it's very similar to our summary of last test report, the canned report we have in Meter Site Manager, and I just kind of replicated this for a spreadsheet. And everything, looks great, right? So everything is really driven by a cell reference. So let's look at the voltage A. So notice when I click on that cell, it's telling me where that data is coming from. So the way this export works, at least from Meter Site Manager's point of view, we're dumping everything into this tab here called Data. So this tab here, this is our data template that we use. So every time you push data, it's gonna populate this backside. Think of it kind of like the back end part of the spreadsheet. and then it's going to populate it over here into the fancy side, right? The part that you want to be able to show or kind of show off, or the useful information that you want to see. So it's just, all it is just a cell reference, and we can create that. So equals data AN7. So what that means is referencing data is this tab, and that exclamation point is just kind of a stop, and then it's going to reference cell AN27. So let's go find that. So click on data, and then I'm looking for cell or column AN, and it's all the way over here. And 27, which is that one, right? So it's pulling the voltage A from that meter test and then repopulating it over here on the customer load test data, right? Okay, so that looks great for someone who wants this, but the nice thing about this is that it's all customizable. So I can change this, and I can do a different cell reference to populate this data coming in over into here. So where did I save my template? I think I got it over here, right? Yeah. Let's close this. I want to save it. And let's go into the template. This is the name of the template that you download. Let's open it up. Data's all here. Okay. So here's the template with nothing populated. Let's pretend I don't like that. So all I got to do, use these cells, go all the way over here, highlight everything, right click, delete. Gone. Still got my template back here. You can't touch this, guys, right? This, you've got to leave it alone. But I can do whatever I want to on this part, this other sheet. So let's say your system, you've got a CIS system or some kind of meter database management system that requires that meter data to be in a specific format. So let's pretend that this format has to have meter SN, so meter serial number. Let's say the full load test, power factor test, and the light load test, right? Okay. So now I'm going to find the meter serial number. So I press the equal button, equal. So it's going to look for a cell reference at that point. So equals, and I go over here to the data tab, and then I look for my meter serial number, which I think is over here somewhere. A lot of custom data points there. Maybe it's up here. There it is. Yep. Meter serial number is data AB3. So remember I hit the equal button, I went to the data tab, and then I found that cell for meter serial number and hit AB3. So once I got it there, I click equals. So it's going to populate 0 because nothing's there, right? Let's do the same thing for full load. So equals, click on the data, and then here's my full load test, which is down here, I believe. Phantom load test, yeah, full load. So we want the registration, which I think is in the percent registration. So that's the column Z, Z31 for full load. So Z31, hit enter, done. Power factor equals, click on data again. It's one right below it. It's Z31 is the same one? No, that's full load. So power factor is right down here. Click on that, done. Light load equals data, the very last one, done. So then, if I'm happy with that, all I got to do now is just click on File and Save. So then now it saves my new template that I could use. So every time I pull this up and I run and I do the same thing. I do that, and then I go to Tools, and then I go to Export Data to Excel. Instead of that one that I gave you, the other one's got the other stuff, bunch of stuff on it. It's just going to populate these 4 cells, and then you'll be a hero with your database manager because that's all he really wants. I really just want these 4 things, and that's it. So you're giving him what he wants. And now let me show you an example I did for another customer. I'm going to close this out. Example template. Yeah, here's an example one I did for a customer. So this customer used to use, they had a bunch of these old power quality analyzers, and they kind of built their system around the data output from this power quality analyzer. And so they, kind of figured out, well, we're really looking for something a little bit more updated, a little bit more accurate. And so they decided to go with our PowerMaster 3 series. But they said, look, we've got this system, and we don't want to change our system. So we love your PowerMaster, but can you get your data out into the format we want? And the answer was yes, no problem. And so they gave me the format, and so all I did, again, just what I did before, notice how theirs is a horizontal, so it's not going vertical direction. I'm sorry, this is vertical, I apologize. It's going a vertical direction as opposed to horizontal direction for the headers. So the headers are going this way. And then the cell references here, remember that data? So that's data tab here. So I just select A3, which was this one. I think it was test date. Yeah. So I'm sorry, DA3. What was DA3? Oh, it was a service type. Gotcha. Okay. So that was kind of what they call wiring, was the service type. So we created this just for them, and in that way they could export all the PowerMaster data, and then they can easily save this. They can go in and save it as a CSV, and then give that to their database manager. They could do it themselves because they actually had access to that system. They click on the CSV file, import that into their system, and they're happy as a lark. So it can be done. If you need some help, give me a call or send me an email, and I can kind of guide you through on how to make this template work for your system, especially when they import it. So I think that kind of wraps us up. That's kind of what I wanted to cover today, was kind of going over the template. We talked about, what all we talk about? Let's look real quick. So we talked about exporting individual meter CT tests and how to analyze that data using conditional formatting, which is a very, very useful tool you've got in Excel. And again, these tools are all free. Well, supposedly free. We think you're on your laptop, you've got Excel, it's been loaded on there. So if you just open up using Excel, you don't have to buy any more software. These are all using data analysis with tools you already have. You're not buying some complex $100,000 piece of software to do this. This is all available on your fingertips. Again, going back to where John Jones always talks about using all the tools you have available. You can't just rely on one single thing to give you all the answers. You got to kind of look at different things to give you similar answers, and then use your brain to kind of bring them all together and come up with a conclusion of what you think is right. I do on another session, I do want to talk about this synchronizing data using SQL Server, which I think is a great tool. If I do send this out, I would also ask if you have a database manager on staff, I would invite them to this as well so they can see some of the features we have, and then possibly use this as a direct connection to your database. It may work for some, and it may not work, but we're using a standard SQL database with an ODBC connection, which is a very standard way of doing things, so it should help out your database management team. But in the meantime, we can use these export-import functions to get the job get the job done. Don't forget, we are not having a webinar Thursday. We'll be on break, so I wish everyone a happy 4th. But we'll be back in the saddle next Tuesday and Thursday talking about PT testing and then having some troubleshooting with user versus real error. I hope you guys have a great 4th. Be safe out there. Wear your masks. Take care.